So I had a failure recently in living by my code. And this taught me a pretty important, or reminded me rather, of a pretty important lesson that I want to pass on to you today. We talk about building and living by your code a lot here at Deep Game, but especially in the how to build deep basketball confidence talk. We spoke about that. If you're a Deep Game member, then in the Deep Game of Confidence course, the full length course, we go into a lot of detail about this. But for me personally, a really foundational part of my code is unconditional kindness. Okay, unconditional kindness, meaning regardless of how kind somebody's being towards me, I'm going to meet them with kindness. This is really fundamental for me. And I want to make a distinction before I tell you what happened and tell you this story and how I failed. I want to make a distinction here that being kind does not mean being soft. Okay, it doesn't mean rolling over and taking abuse from somebody and not standing up for yourself. It simply means being kind. So even when you stand up for yourself, you can be solid, but don't return aggression and hostility towards people. So to tell you what happened, basically the other day I needed to replace my bedding, and I typically, like, I do most of my shopping online. I really don't like to go out shopping in brick and mortar stores. And a lot of people don't, but in this particular day I was in a little bit of a rush. It was cold outside. I was like hurried and not thrilled about having to go to the store, not even thrilled about having to replace the bedding. So I called this store ahead of time and I spoke with the manager and I said, "Hey, do you have this particular set of bed sheets in stock?" He said, "Yes." "Do you have them in this color?" He said, "Yes," "in this size," and so on. And I said, "Okay, can you put them aside for me?" So I head over to the store, and I went up to the manager and said, "Hey, I called in. Do you like have them put aside?" He brings them back to me, and they were the wrong ones. And so I said, "Okay, well, these aren't quite the right ones. Can you do you have these particular ones?" And so he leads me over to a shelf and he says, "Yeah, we've got those ones." Points to them, and I'm like, "That's not what I asked for. Those aren't the right sheets." So he goes into the back and he brings back another set of sheets and he's like, "These are the right ones." And I said, "No, those aren't the ones I'm looking for. I know the ones I'm looking for, I promise you." And he kept on making these sorts of mistakes. And it was very clear that he wasn't super thrilled to be there either. He wasn't too enthusiastic about his job. This was not by any means his life purpose. He was just, trying to get through the day. And I found myself getting more and more frustrated that these sorts of little it was like he just wasn't paying attention to his job and making mistakes as a result of that. And my time was being wasted. I was getting more frustrated. I was thinking, like, how am I going to get through to this guy that, like, hey, like, this is what I'm looking for. It's not a hard thing. And so I just start getting more frustrated. I don't overtly become rude to him at any point, but I became kind of cold and short with him and like, "No, this is what I want," and very like overtly direct, a little bit sharper than I needed to be. Again, not rude, but sharp. And this is a natural thing. Like it's completely, to a lot of people, I'm sure this would be a normal encounter. But eventually I got to the point with this employee when I said, like, "Okay, you're not hearing what I'm saying. I'm leaving. Like, you don't have what I'm looking for. And it's very clear, like, I'm not going to purchase these sheets. I'm going to leave." And I said that very clear and sharp and direct. And he again didn't listen to me. And like, it became this big thing. And he like went into the back again. Eventually, I just straight up left. And as I was leaving, I went from this feeling of frustration and annoyance with this employee who wasn't listening to me clearly, to this sense of this sinking feeling in my body that, oh, wait, I failed to live by my code. I failed to live by my code. That was a failure. And I left this person worse than I found them. Like as unenthusiastic as he was about his job, his day is probably a little bit worse for having had that interaction with me. And I absolutely was not unconditionally kind to him. I became sharp. I became cold. I became very short in my responses to him. I became not unconditionally kind. And the only appropriate response for me, according to my code in that situation, would be to meet This person, regardless of how incompetent they might be, would be to meet that person with kindness. Okay. I can still be clear on what I want, but to be kind in the delivery. And I may have actually had a much smoother and much quicker and less frustrating interaction with that person. But in the moment, I was frustrated and I let that show. So I got back in my car thinking, like, wow, okay, that was a reminder that my code has nothing to do with anybody but me. And this is the real critical point here that I want you to get, is that your code, when you live by your code, it has nothing to do with anybody but you. So you upholding your code is not dependent on how another person reacts to you. It's not dependent on how another person is acting towards you. All that matters is you live by your code. Don't allow people to steamroll you and to take advantage of you, and all of that goes without saying. But if unconditional kindness is a part of your code, that means that even if somebody is being frustrating or even overtly hostile, you still meet them with kindness. And there is a much deeper strength in that kindness that I want you to notice. If I had become hostile towards this person, it's because my mind is not strong enough to override that hostility. And so kindness requires your ability to override that impulse to be aggressive and hostile in return, or in my case, it was not aggressive and hostile, but just short and cold and a little bit sharper than I needed to be. In that moment, because I was already frustrated and annoyed and didn't want to be there and so on and so forth, I just didn't override that. And kindness would have been the stronger move. So learn from that mistake that I made. Okay. If unconditional kindness is a part of your code, then just remember it has nothing to do with anybody but you. And regardless of what your code is made up of, again, it has nothing to do with anybody but you. There's no excuse to not follow your code in every circumstance, regardless of what anybody else is doing. All right. So learn from that mistake of mine. I hope this helped you out, and I will see you in the next one.
Hey, it's Taylor. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you did, the best thing to do right now while it's fresh in your mind is to head over to deepgame.com and join us in our free masterclass. Now, this is where you'll learn all 8 laws of the deep game and all of the fundamentals that you need to know about the part of basketball that's played with the mind. We've had players call this the best hour of basketball learning of their lives, and it's completely free right now. So head over to deepgame.com to join us, and I will see you there.